want to go back out live to West 2's Amanda Ober with our legal analyst. So, Amanda, what do Jeff and Richard have to say about today?
Well, they always have a lot to say, Aixa, and it's always interesting. So let's dive right in. Lee Anthony on the stand, and there was this very emotional moment where he started to break down and sobbed as he talked about how personally hurt he felt during Casey's pregnancy when his mom and his sister didn't talk to him about it. And just a personal observation here, I felt uncomfortable with his reaction. I thought, 5 years later, the secret might have hurt him, but where's that sobbing coming from? What do you gentlemen think?
Well, Amanda, I'm not a psychologist, but I get to play one on TV. And
which is a little frightening.
Yeah. Here's what I think. I think it's the same problem that the state had when they called him. I don't know if you recall when Frank George called Lee, and the state was kind of tentative. They didn't really know what Lee was going to say. I don't think they expected him to have this faulty, selective amnesia type thing. And I think that's the thing with Baez. I think Lee wants to save his sister's life, and I think he also doesn't want her to go to jail, period. But I think he's willing to go to a limit, and I think he at one point maybe been willing to go over that edge for his sister, but once he was on the stand after staring at his parents while he was going to be, I think, asked to reveal the family secret, which is supposedly a molestation or something like that, I think he backed out and he's like, you know what, this is as far as I want to go. It's like the family secret is we hid the pregnancy.
So you think Baez really thought at that point Lee was going to say something about the sex abuse, the alleged sex abuse?
You don't put someone on the stand unless you know what they're going to say, or you expect them to say something, and you don't keep asking them, is there anything else, unless you expect there to be something else.
Well, and a source this morning who had a conversation with Baez said that Baez hinted there was going to be explosive testimony from Lee, and we didn't hear that. So that's in line with what you're saying. Do you agree, Jeff?
Oh, I do. They have a sidebar. He's sitting at the sidebar. He starts to cry. He starts to weep in the thing. Casey Anthony's over there bawling her eyes out. There's a big argument at the bench. They come back out. He asks the question, what were you upset about? Because the state had already objected to that question to start with. What are you upset about? He can't talk. Everybody's moving to the edge of their seat. What are you excited about? What were you mad about? What were you upset about? Jeff Ashton's objecting to almost every word of it. Mm-hmm. They didn't include me. Okay, come on. Of course, that's what everybody thought he was going to say. Everybody thought he was going to say something about his father and her being molested. He had already set that testimony up by the fact that he said that he recognized very early on that she was pregnant. Her dad has already testified that he didn't know till very late that she was pregnant. They were all in the same environment. Mm-hmm. Everybody thought he was gonna give up the ghost right then, and it didn't happen. And that's about the 5th or 6th time it hasn't happened.
Wow. And while we're having this discussion, something I want to point out for our viewers, because the question continues to come up, is people still wonder, could Lee or George be the father of Kaylee? And we know that paternity tests proved that was not the case, that they are not the father of Kaylee. But my question to you gentlemen is, after lunch, the state cross-examines Lee. What do they ask him?
We don't know.
We don't know.
That was a great moment right there. I got nothing.
Well, here's the thing, and that's the problem, is I don't think anybody knows anymore what they will say.
Okay.
That is the problem the defense has. I don't think Baez knows exactly what Lee will say. And here's the thing about Lee. I really think he's a wild card in this whole trial because he was the first Anthony to get an attorney, Tom Luca. He's the only Anthony to never have given an interview. We've never seen him give more depositions or statements than are absolutely required of him. And we saw his really odd emotional display at Kaylee's memorial where he was like, CMA, I love you, CMA this, CMA
I
that.
promise to protect you, CMA.
And here's the thing. What I haven't gotten out of discovery is that Lee was a particularly close uncle. When I mean close, like he replaced the father figure in her life. And so that's why it struck me as odd that I don't think he was talking to Kaylee Marie Anthony. I think he was talking to Casey.
I agree.
Anthony. And so he's clearly the wild card in here. But Amanda, here's my opinion of what I think the broader picture is, what we're seeing with Cindy and what we're seeing with Lee. And as you point out about who the father is, the subtext of what's going on in Baez is, I think he's making the point very subtly and very clear to the jury. The subtext is this family does have secrets. And he's making that point by literally making that point with each witness. He's making the point that Cindy's only willing to say enough to help Casey without also throwing the rest of her family under the bus or herself. Lee is willing to say enough to help Casey and insert reasonable doubt, but he's not willing to go that far. Basically, they're willing to reveal enough of their family secrets to try to help out Casey, but no more than they absolutely have to.
So may this jury only end up getting hints and implications that there was sex abuse, but never really hearing someone testify about it?
I can't imagine that if they had evidence of that you wouldn't have already heard it.
Okay.
That's a point that they stressed in the opening statement. It's a moment that they could have had at the very beginning of the trial. They could have had it a couple of times in the state's case. They've set it up a couple of times in their own case, including yesterday and today. And I can't imagine that there's some direct evidence out there that nobody's seen yet and that they have just failed to ask. That is a big point in their defense. They've locked themselves in. They did it again today. The judge reiterated what their defense was. They've affirmed that again. At some point, you're going to have to hear that.
Yeah, let's talk about that moment this morning when the judge said to the defense, okay, guys, what is your defense theory?
The judge had cited a case right before that, and without going into the technicalities of what the case said, what it actually said was, is that what a defense presents as far as what's relevant in a defense case is pretty liberal. If it goes to anything that has to do with one of their defenses, then the judge has to let it in. And he alluded to some pictures that he let in that he didn't think that might be relevant about the ladder and the window and the pictures of the videotape and things like that with Casey playing with her daughter, because they go indirectly at least to the defense that she drowned. That point of law is really weighing on this judge right now. He is walking a very thin line about what he's excluding because of the objection of relevance that Jeff Ashton keeps making. It's not relevant, it's not relevant. You know what? Almost all is relevant, especially this evidence of about the affair, this River Cruise person. If he wasn't getting along with his wife at the time and he was having an affair, it is not a far leap to say that he wouldn't have confided in his wife that her granddaughter had drowned, and that's why she doesn't know, but he does. I don't know if they've made that argument to this judge, but at some point, that's relevant.
And Amanda, the question's been asked of us just about every day we've been here is, will Casey Anthony testify? How can they get in this evidence without Casey Anthony testifying? And I think we're seeing how they could get in the evidence without Casey Anthony testifying. Because remember, Baez gave this very graphic description of a sexual act between George and Casey. And all of us, I think, assumed it either would have to be George or Casey that would testify to that event. However, if another person walked in on that event, they could then testify to that event. And I think that that's how Baez hopes to get in. I don't know that we're necessarily done with Lee Anthony or Cindy Anthony either. I wouldn't be surprised if Lee Anthony goes, well, there is something else I wanted to say, and I just couldn't bring myself to say it, but now I can. Because Baez is almost doing the same thing the state did in their case in chief. Now that he's got the forensics out of the way, he's going to start going through the family dynamic chronologically, and he's going to start building up to it. And I think that's why he's going to kind of end with, something big. I still don't think Casey's going to testify, but I think someone's going to come forward and lay a bombshell that supports Baez's theory. Maybe at the end of the day, we were all wrong and Baez was really right.
Maybe.
But, because he's proving us wrong, I think, the last few days. I don't think anybody expected yesterday about Cindy saying, I searched for chloroform.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody expected Lee to come on here and do what he did. And I think we were all screaming on our TV and our computer monitors, say it, say it, say it. And then he didn't say it. But the fact is he did get on there and he made some kind of emotional outpour that none of us even thought about him doing. So I think there's more to come from the Anthonys, and stay tuned.
Well, and that leads beautifully to my next question. We come back after lunch, and the state will do, we've got some loud sirens going by. The state will do their cross-examination of Lee. Is it possible that Jose could continue to press him maybe during rebuttal on this issue of the sex abuse?
Well, he can recall him if he needs to, so there's no real need to have a rebuttal this time. I think that this is pure speculation on my part, but I don't believe that Jose Baez thought...
Can I stop you? 100% of what we do is speculation.
100% of it. And let me tell you that those sirens weren't for Richard. So the point of it is, though, is I think that Jose Baez expected Lee Anthony to say something about something along the lines of what Richard has alluded to. I don't think he expected the answer he got I don't think anybody did, because that was a lot of argument. I think Jeff Ashton, just by his sheer number of objections, was expecting the very worst, and it just didn't happen.
Absolutely. I think Jeff was scared that it would occur, as Bias was hoping it would occur. And I don't think we're done with the Anthonys. What we will see with these law enforcement people that are there, I think they're going to be brought in by Bias to say, well, isn't it true Miss Anthony was confused on these days, or she exhibited some kind of confusion? Isn't it true there was some problems in front of this evidence? I think he's going to bring these people in now to kind of bolster the confusion that they've testified to so far.
Okay. All right, Richard Hornsby and Jeff Dean, thank you so much as always. That does it for us here at our courthouse studio for now. But stay with West 2 News. We'll be here to bring you analysis as the trial continues. Reporting live from our courthouse studio, Amanda Ober, West 2 News.
Thanks so much, Amanda. And